He goes off to this auditorium where all these dignitaries and scholars and doctors and maharajas and who knows what are in the audience. And Rob is sitting at the front of the auditorium up there on the platform to be introduced. And a very distinguished gentleman gets up to the lectern and starts to introduce him. And about a minute into the introduction, Rob realizes that this man is introducing Bernard Schwartz from NYU, whose field is administrative law. So Rob doesn't blink an eye. When the introduction is over, he gets up, he gives his lecture on health law, and everybody stands and gives him a huge round of ovation.
I've known Rob for almost 30 years, and I met him when I was at ACLU, and my old boss, Grace Watson-Williams, said, "Oh, just go ask Rob Schwartz. He'll know the answer about church-state things." So I met him, and he was so wonderful. He said, "Come to my church-state class. Come sit in, and you will learn all about it." And it was the first time I'd ever been in the law school, and the first time I'd ever heard of a law lecture, really. So it's been a wonderful friendship ever since then.
Rob and I go back to prehistoric times. We were housemates at Harvard Law School, class of 73. We met each other then, we got to know each other well, and we kept touch over the years. And by sort of happenstance, we wound up both being co-authors on what turned out to be the leading health law casebook.
My name is Ted Parnell, and this is Dick Gonzalez. We've both known Rob Schwartz since the mid-1970s when he joined our faculty. He came with Dick and Jim Ellis, three young faculty members. We always considered ourselves as an older cohort. We were somewhat older, in our mid-30s, and we felt a little bit old and jaded by that time. As a matter of fact, Rob Schwartz especially provided a great deal of energy and challenge, intellectual challenge to this very senior mid-30 group.
Well, we were the kids. We were the young group that came in 1976, and I remember Rob showed up as a transfer from the prestigious Rohde firm, which we referred to as Rohde, Dickinson, Sloan, Aiken, and Rob Schwartz.
Rob's teaching style requires that you be very patient and analytical and not rush to any conclusions. And of course that's true for all professors, or ideally all professors. And it's really important for all lawyers. But that same kind of patience really affects everything he does. And it's really affected my relationship with him when I as a much more hot-tempered person, have gone off. Just take a minute, just think about this. It's managed to keep a friendship alive for 30 years.
We took a number of classes together, and one particular memory is walking back from the final exam with Rob. We would talk about how we had answered each question. Rob convinced me that I had aced the course because everything I said was just brilliant. He hadn't thought of it. And he also convinced me that sadly he wasn't made for law school. He was just going to flunk because he just had no idea. And then a couple weeks later, the grades came out. And I got my B+ and Rob got an A in the course. And that was a pretty consistent pattern.
I think the word that comes to mind when I think of Rob is enthusiastic. I taught a course called Employment Law, which is not really a course. It's really a series of courses. It's kind of a survey of a number of areas of the law. I got in over my head in this particular part of the course when they added a lot of healthcare stuff. So I went to our healthcare expert, which was Rob, and asked him, what am I going to do about this class? I need to put something together, but I'm in way over my head. Tell me what I need to do. So Rob gave me a kind of a tutorial on the healthcare amendments to ERISA, and I was still over my head. And I asked him, Rob, is there any way you can do this class for me? And he said, of course, sure, I'd be happy to. So he came in, he did the class, and he made it fun. This statute is long, it's complex. It's longer than the Internal Revenue Code, but not as funny. And he did a fabulous job with it.
Rob has done so much for the sense of dignity of the individual. He has been a real champion for the aid in dying, and I went with him to the legislature back in the 90s to try to get a bill passed. And he has been so consistent on that issue. And I think that the reason that he's consistent about it is tied in with his sense of dignity and his sense of kind-heartedness, that he really does think that each person has a conscience worth preserving.
One of the ways I would describe him is he's very generous. He's generous with his time. He's generous with his friendship. He really is outgoing in the best sense, that he really reaches out to other people. In that vein, I'd also say, obviously, he's very funny, but he has a good wry sense of humor and a good way to point out the irony in a lot of the law and what's going on. So I'd say all of that. And he's just a really smart guy. So those characteristics really stand out. And, it's impossible for me to think that he is anything but well-liked by everybody.
I had dinner with Rob. I think it was the evening after he was appointed to the regent position. And we got to talking about governance at the university. And he made it very clear that he felt that the regents in past years had been overly active in meddling in the governance of the university, that really should be the province of the university administration and the faculty. And he's very much committed to that.
I don't know of a law school professor who's anxious to go teach freshmen in college, but Rob did that because he wanted to make sure that people knew how to think and how to read, and he gave them an insight to law. That can't have been fun, but he did it anyway, and he did it for some time. And not that many people will go over and hang out with the doctors and teach them health law, but Rob will do that, and he did it. And again, it's part of his being the gifted teacher he is.
One of the things I liked having Rob on the faculty, when I was dean especially, was that I took a great deal of vicarious pride over all the different things he established. In the healthcare field, with the medical legal day, I often thought that if we could have cloned Rob Schwartz, we could have had a medical legal empire at 1117 Stanford. I never had the occasion of asking Rob to do anything, to speak to alumni groups, to take on an extra class, where he turned it down. He was totally unselfish in that regard. And so, this may be a little bit of a surprise to him. I hope it's not. I'm sure it's okay with him. But I've signed him up to do a health law seminar in Kabul next summer. I'm sure he'll do it. He can bring Jane, and it'll work out fine.
There was a directory of all law professors in the United States, and you filed this long questionnaire as to what was going to be in the reporting about yourself. And Rob decided there were a few too many Schwartzes teaching law. So he decided he was going to give himself a colorful name. So for several years, he was listed not as Robert Schwartz, but as Flaco Schwartz, Slim Schwartz in Spanish. And then he decided to change it, and he later listed himself as Moose Schwartz, the only Moose known to have taught law.
Nobody gave him these nicknames. Rob came up with these nicknames for himself, and the first one
Was Moose.
Okay,
Moose.
so he was known as Moose Schwartz, and it even appeared in the ALS booklet that had all our pictures and our bios. He had Robert Moose Schwartz, and then later he changed his nickname to Rhino, and that became his semi-official name, Rob Rhino Schwartz. And none of us has any idea how he came up with those names, but they seem to
Or why.
Yeah, or why, but they seem to kind of fit.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Rhino fits.
He would list his affiliations as his writing as the law of pet grooming, and he would come up with funny things to put in. And at the time, they just routinely published it that way. So it was very entertaining.
The thing about Rob is that he really does give a damn about people. He doesn't just like you for your ideas. He doesn't dislike you for your ideas. He accepts you, and you feel you're in his family. You're in his embrace just by being who you are. He is so accepting and so warm and loving that he's disarming, as we talked about before, but he's also just so genuine that he actually does care. And that is really unusual, because I don't think most people really care about each person they meet, but Rob does.
Rob Schwartz deserves this award because this award really was made exactly for someone like Rob Schwartz. I can think of no other person, no other faculty member, no other lawyer whose service to the University of New Mexico Law School can outmatch the contributions that Rob has made.
He is a remarkably devoted teacher. I mean, I don't know anybody who is as thorough and interested, genuinely interested in his students. He goes out of his way to know them all and to bring coffee and cookies for them in the morning, and he really has a genuine interest in students. And I think that's reflected by the fact that in New Mexico he seems to know everybody in every law firm and in state government as well.
I think Rob probably has been deserving of this award for the last 30 years. And the fact that it is only being awarded to him now, I think means that he's just never been a self-promoter. You see Rob doing his job and it's like Rob is just doing what Rob does. And it doesn't strike you that there's anything remarkable about it until you stop and think about what he's done. And then his achievements are remarkable, and he certainly deserves this award.
He's also been there for every time that somebody needs to understand the separation of church and state. He's been there for teaching legislative and administrative processes. He's been there for health law, goodness sake. He's been a textbook author of renown for decades. So all of those combined, as well as his openness to students, his constant availability for anybody who's struggling, and his patience with everybody who ever asks a question, really has been a credit to this university and this law school. And that's why I think it's long overdue, because he's deserved it for years.
And Rob, in closing, I just want to say that with all of the words that Dick and I have made about your being willing to sacrifice and your energy and your devotion to the law, that you will accept that speaking engagement in Kabul next summer. Really, I think you'll have a blast.
Congratulations, Rob. Even though you don't think so, the rest of this room thinks you really deserve it.
Rob is the kind of guy that you want in your lifeboat. That's the sort of person he is.
I cry like Richard Nixon and all his pals, so I hate to do it with Rob, but Rob, you've meant everything to me and to a million students.